Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this week's Lumix Live session. This week's going to be kind of a bit more tech heavy. I know a lot of you guys are very patiently waiting for the Lumix S1H ProRes RAW to be released, but unfortunately that is not something that we were discussing during this week's stream. For updates on that, make sure that you guys are getting subscribed to the emails. Make sure you're subscribing to this channel in particular for when we do have announcements when that is coming. So I just want to get that out of the way. I know, again, a lot of you guys are very patiently waiting, and I think you guys will be very excited when it does come out. So a little housekeeping out of the way here. If you are new to these Lumix Live streams, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for this Lumix Cameras channel so that you can get updated when we do these streams, which typically are happening every single week on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Every once in a while, we'll have a special event like we did last week on photojournalism. So you want to make sure that you're getting subscribed so that you get those notifications. We cover a variety of topics from more tech-heavy discussions like what we're discussing today, to interviews, conversations with photographers out there. So a big mix of content for varying different styles of photography and videography. Again, for those new here, if you guys have questions for me during this stream, make sure to drop them in the chat, whether that's below or to the side, depending on what platform you're on. And make sure to tag @Lumix Camera. This way I see it in the portal here, which again, actually on this topic, we're actually going to be talking about how we do these streams and how we interact. So you guys will get a little bit of a sneak peek behind the scenes here. So the topics that we're going to be covering today are really three kind of major areas. We're going to be talking about the firmware updates and the announcements that were made a little bit earlier, where we're, primarily updates for the streaming beta software, some future software that's coming out, as well as the firmware updates for a number of the semi-higher end to high-end cameras, as well as talking about how our streams have evolved and hopefully providing some tips for you out there who may be wanting to get into this style of content creation, whether that's for the remaining time that we're dealing with the current global pandemic, but then also ways that you can utilize this outside of that when we start to return to some normalcy in the industry for providing better content for your clients. And then we're going to round it out with a bit of a photography topic, which is a little bit close to my heart because I love astrophotography. And those of you who may be following the news, following what's going on in the night skies, we have the Neowise Comet overhead right now that's actually getting into a pretty good time frame to be photographed at night. So I'll give you some tips and tricks on how to photograph that, how to plan for it, and then share some images that I shot last night driving about an hour and a half, almost 2 hours outside of Austin, Texas here. So we will make sure to keep all that stuff updated. As I said, drop questions as you have them down in the chat, and myself, I will answer them. And we also have Jack Salamanchek in the chat as well, checking on some questions and giving you guys some answers as well. So let's jump right into it. So the first thing I want to talk about today is, kind of get all the formal stuff out of the way. So the firmware update and the information that was provided for that. So for those that don't know, we will be providing a firmware update for the GH5, GH5S, G9, G95, G85, and GX9 to add support for the new SHGR1 grip. So for those that may not know about that, that is the grip that is bundled with the new G100, which is going to give you the same functionality that we've got in the G100, just on some of the other cameras. So just working on some backwards compatibility there. What's nice about it is that for those that want to utilize this grip as, a micro tripod, something you just want to be able to throw in the bag and not have to necessarily carry around your larger tripod, it ends up being a nice accessory for those. It gives you sleep functionality, video start stop, still start and stop, which actually came in handy last night. And again, just becomes that small little compact. Now, it is on a limited basis for the cameras that are getting firmware updated for it right now. I know some people have asked about, GX cameras, some of the other cameras out there in the system. I don't know the exact reasons other than there may be some potential hardware differences on how the USB port is managed for that. So again, if things change, make sure that you're subscribing to our emails, watching these streams, because as we get that kind of information, we will definitely be emailing out to everybody, making announcements, that kind of thing. But then we'll probably also discuss it here on the stream. The other addition that we've added in this announcement was the update for the LUMIX Beta streaming software, so Tether software for the Mac OS. I know a ton of you guys all commented when we were doing the initial stream on this about why wasn't Mac OS released yet. And just as we said, with Mac OS, it takes usually a little bit longer to develop the software, make sure everything's working as best it can for beta software, but it is available. So I'm going to actually go through a bit of a demonstration as to how to connect it, what you want to look for, how the app that you're going to download, the interface, how it works, to give a refresher for those that are new to this. I saw a few comments come through on the posts that we made about this stream asking if there was a Windows version, and there already is a Windows version for those that don't know. We will leave a link in the description after this stream, so when it's posted on YouTube, that'll have links where you can go download these for both Windows and Mac. And remember, it is limited cameras that have the hardware necessary to facilitate the tethering function. So that unfortunately isn't every camera out there, but as a way to kind of update some of this, we have also announced, for those that have pointed out, that this platform is really useful for streaming, so what we're doing here. But if you're trying to use the software for things like Zoom or Teams or Google Meet, one of those platforms, you typically need a device that's registered as a webcam on your computer. So we did make the announcement that we will be creating a webcam software for the cameras. It is going to be coming out a little bit later this year, so we haven't given specifics on it other than September for Windows, October for Mac. So again, a little bit of a difference there. But that will allow you to connect the camera in and have it register as an actual webcam device. So again, make sure you're subscribed. You'll get the updates when that stuff comes out, and we'll most definitely be doing a live stream to discuss about it at that point as well. So with that, I'm going to jump over to the MacBook, and for those that are new to this, give you guys kind of a walkthrough as to how this works. If you've already seen this, just hang on with us. It's going to be a few minutes. We're just going to make sure we get everyone kind of comfortable with this. So with that, let's jump over here. So I'm looking at my MacBook Pro. So this is just it's a 2020 MacBook Pro 13-inch. And I have obviously my desktop here. And I'm tethering this with a GH5S. It was the first camera I grabbed out of my closet here. So the first thing you're going to want to do is plug in the USB cable that comes with the camera. You can use other longer cables. Just make sure that they're high quality USB-C cables. Cheaper cables can cause problems with distance runs, bandwidth. You want to make sure that it's a quality cable. So I either use the included cables because I'm usually not that far away from the device, or I've been using some of the Tether Tools USB-C cables for connecting in here. Reliability is number one with that kind of stuff. So what you'll do is plug it into the computer and plug the camera, the cable into the camera, and just power the camera on. So you don't have to have the app open. You don't need to have any of that done yet. You'll be prompted with a screen that says PC storage, PC tether, or PIC bridge. PickBridge is that older protocol for connecting directly into a printer. Tether is for our Tether, and then PC storage is for those that know, that's so that you can actually access the memory card. So we're going to select PC Tether. Now, once you select PC Tether, the camera's going to go back into a shoot ready mode. And from there, all you have to do is go into your either Launchpad, if you don't have it on the main taskbar here, just scroll over and look for Lumix Tether for streaming. Now, this software, if you have the standard Lumix Tether, you'll see the same icon, but it won't have the beta symbol next to it. For this purpose, you want to make sure you're clicking on the one that has the beta symbol. So once I click that, the beta software opens. Give it a second or two, and you're greeted with this screen. This is the main control panel for it. So you're getting a ton of overall control over this. So the same as the standard Tether software. I see a question, instead of tethering, why not native USB driver for streaming? If you did just join us, that is coming down the line. That is being developed for sometime in September or October, depending on the platform you're on. Usually takes a little bit longer for that kind of development, but it is coming. So in the meantime, we've got this very simple, straightforward method to be able to use what's already in existence in the tethering system for us, so that you can at least do things like this, live stream with it. So back to this. The Lumix Tether software gives you a ton of control over what you want to do with your camera. So unlike some of the other platforms, you have the ability to come in here, change your resolutions, change the actual mode you're shooting in, what aperture, all of that kind of stuff can be controlled on the actual computer, as opposed to just a webcam where you need to actually do it on the camera itself. So for this, what I'll do is I'll tap on the LV button, which will bring up the live view screen here. And as you can see, I have this running right now, where I have my overall UI set up here, which means I can see the face detection box. I have all of my controls on the side so that it really gives me all of that control. But what's new in this version, which again is also in the Windows version, is you'll see you have live view quality, which you can change from low, standard, or fine. Now, what this gives you is different resolutions that are coming over USB. So low is 640 by 480, standard is 960 by 720, and then fine is 1280 by 960. So if I'm correct on that, I believe that is actually one of the highest resolutions over USB for this kind of video. So you have the option there to select whether you want fine, standard, or low. Typically for streaming, I'll do fine because usually I'm sending only a 1080p signal out for streaming. You can do it in 4K from a streaming perspective, but most people don't have the bandwidth for that. So here I have this set up as fine. Now, once I'm ready to actually go streaming with this, I have to do a couple of things. We've added the button up here, which when pressed, removes all of the UI from the screen. So that takes away the face detection box, that takes away all of those controls on the side. This means that I can now take this and do a window capture of this stream so that my programs like OBS, like we use for this particular stream, detects it as a video source, which means I can actually use this now, so pretty much like any other platform. Now, for those that, again, are new to that, you do need to record audio separately, so something like a simple USB microphone, or something like what I'm going to cover next about our stream. There has to be some other audio source there, and that's standard for most of the applications that are out there, to my knowledge, that are doing this kind of tethering webcam platform. Short of having just a simple basic webcam, which is going to be much lower quality video, you want to get some sort of microphone. So again, for those that have just joined us, make sure that if you have questions throughout the stream, to drop them in the chat. tagging at Lumix cameras so that Jack Salamanchek or myself will see them and we can answer them during the stream. So that's pretty much it for the Lumix Tether software. Again, not a huge major change to the overall platform. Like I said, we have this for the Windows system already, and it works pretty well. I've used it a couple of times for meetings, things like that, where the OBS platform is what I'm using to send it out. So things like Facebook or YouTube, anything that can take a stream key will let you use this device. Now, a couple comments about the cameras. So one of the things that you want to make sure is, particularly like with this GH5S that I was using, if you want to use autofocus for this, or you want to have the camera ready to go in standby so that it's using face detection, you want to make sure that you go into the camera menu and you go into the actual second menu down in this one. And you're going to look for the continuous AF option. Once you're in that, you want to make sure that that's reading as mode 2 as opposed to mode 1. Mode 2 allows the camera to autofocus during standby. Mode 1, it'll only do continuous autofocus while it's actually recording. So in this case, we don't need recording. You can still record if you wanted to, but we don't need the recording. We want to have this actually just set up for mode 2. So the only other major point on there is you want to make sure that you have the camera set in the creative video mode. This way it's that 16:9 aspect ratio. And typically for streaming, like I said, because I'm really only ever outputting 1080p for most streams and classes, set the camera to 1080p. It ends up being pretty straightforward. So again, let's see here. Did you cover whether all Lumix cameras will work with Tether or only specific? So there's only specific cameras that work with the Tether, the streaming software currently. It's the S1H, S1R, S1, GH5S, GH5, and G9 as of right now. We'll look, obviously keep up to date on emails and the streams. If new cameras get added to it, there will be announcements that will provide that information for you. Let's see, another question from D. Cook. When I'm live streaming the GH5, all looks good in the live view and OBS, but then the resolution in YouTube is bad. What can I do to improve it? So that's actually a good segue into the second part of our conversation, which is how we've improved the Lumix Live, the streaming that we're doing here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually jump over to a second camera I have set up here, which you can now see behind me. So with streaming across the board, there's a number of ways that you can do this. Obviously, you can do the kind of simplified version that we were talking about with Lumix Tether, which is a great kind of stopgap to get yourself into it, utilizing cameras that you may already have, and be able to just kind of run with it. But that's just the hardware side. One of the kind of bigger parts that happens with streaming that a lot of people may not be 100% aware of is looking at what resolution you want to stream at, what frame rate you want to stream at, and all of that really kind of relates to what your bandwidth is. So the higher the upload speed for bandwidth, the better it's going to be. A lot of times if you look at your network provider, you'll get really good fast download speeds. Like I have gigabit here, and it works great. But your upload speeds, unless you're doing something like Google Fiber or some of the other really high-end fiber connections, are going to be much lower in upload speed. So in Texas here, this apartment that I'm in, I have gigabit download, but I have around 45 to 50 megabit upload. So for that particular point, you want to kind of check that first. Make sure that you have enough bandwidth to send up for the stream, depending on what actual platform or what resolution you're using. If you're using OBS, when you go into the settings, it does give you some information about what the average bit rate should be for YouTube. Like as an example, we stream here 1080 60 frames per second, and I have a 10 megabit upload for it. So that's what we're sending up, and that's because I have the headroom for me to be streaming, my wife in the other room watching Netflix or doing work on her computer, it gives you enough headroom. So that's the first thing to check. The next thing to look at is to make sure that your OBS system is set up properly, that you're not trying to take a 1080p stream and then send it up as a 4K stream, because you're going to get a ton of compression artifacts there. When it gets to YouTube, YouTube has its own compression. So what I suggest is the first Lumix live stream we did actually walks through how I recommend setting up OBS for streaming. So we will put a link in the description of this video for that as well. That, or actually I'll post a card here. I think I can do that before it gets posted. So that you have some of that information. I think it's about halfway or 3/4 of the way through that stream. So again, you'll have all that information. But when it comes to streaming in general, which the question from Werner here, what kind of HDMI capture card do you use now for yourself? That's exactly what we're going to talk about. So when we started these Lumix live streams, we were using the Elgato HD60S Plus, partially because that was the only one I could find at the time. As those that have been looking for these things know that capture cards they're getting a little bit easier to find, but they were massively hard to find. And those ones that you could find were either very low quality or the brand name ones were really price gouged by individuals that were purchasing up and then capitalizing on it. So this capture card worked great for us to start with, and it still does work great. Those looking, seeing that I have one that currently isn't being used, we do use it. When we have guests on, I'll cover how that works as well. You need a second capture card for that, at least for my setup. So that was what we started with. The first upgrade we made to the Lumix live stream was the Blackmagic ATEM Mini. Now there are two versions of it. There's the ATEM Mini, then there's the ATEM Mini Pro. Some of it comes down to, do you want the ability to stream directly from the ATEM if you have that connection and that capability? For my purpose and our purpose, I didn't need any of that, so just the basic ATEM Mini was really all I needed. And again, that was incredibly hard to come by. So shout out to one of our local video AV suppliers down here in Austin, Texas, that was able to get it for us. Those guys saved my life. Being able to get this thing so that we can continue made my life so much easier. So we've got that. That gives us a number of capabilities. So the stream like we're doing right now, the fact that I have a second camera up here, I have my main camera in front of me, sometimes I'll have a third camera that I've got set up where I want to do a demonstration. This gives me up to 4 inputs so that I can be able to actually show multiple different things. If I wanted to show the camera menu options, I can just jump over to a different channel, throw on the picture-in-picture like we have here, which is right there, and be able to actually demonstrate this. So those that are very used to working in this kind of stream, this isn't new to you guys. You guys know that, you know, a good switcher is worth its weight in gold. But for us, it gave us a ton of that flexibility, especially when we do classes. Like myself, I'm part of the sales support team here with Panasonic Lumix USA. We have a ton of members across the US that teach classes, and these things become increasingly useful when you're trying to do one-on-one sessions, when you're trying to educate someone. So again, thinking ways that you can utilize this outside of just the current situation. So that was the first upgrade we did. The second upgrade that was done for our streaming was actually a personal upgrade here. This is the stream computer that I use here, and I'm gonna actually zoom in here and show you guys. So, and for those that may wanna know, the camera that I'm using up here, this is a Lumix S1 with a 16-35 f4 running HDMI over to the switcher. So again, all Lumix all the time. So this is the stream computer that I use for this platform. I've gotten a couple questions about, you know, what I actually use for this. And when I started it, the first streams we were doing, it was an Intel-based system. It was an i5, it was a 4th gen. It ran a GTX 980 Ti. So not the newest hardware by any stretch of the imagination. It was actually probably around 5-6 years old at that point. And it relatively got the job done. It did what we needed it to. For myself, my photo and video editing, it worked. And you know, it's okay. But as we started doing this more, one of the things that that you may run into is really having to monitor the resources that you're using on your computer. How much processor is being used, how much of the graphics cards, how much is being used on them. So looking at my system, I decided to do a total rebuild on it. So this is now an AMD platform, which I know those Intel versus AMD guys out there, yes, you can have an argument one way or another which one's better, but at the time, this was actually a really good, and it still is, it's one of the best value processors you can get. So this is a Ryzen 5 3900, nothing crazy. It's being cooled by a Be Quiet ProRock 4 cooler, so it stays nice and quiet. It's in a Corsair IQ20 case, so that has all of the great RGB goodness for those that love RGB, but it can be turned off. But the core of what I use for this right here is I have 2 graphics cards installed in here. And this is where you can look at, what do you want to use this for? So I have an MSI Radeon RX 5700 XT in here, Mech OC, so it's a factory overclocked graphics card. And that handles 90% of what I'm doing on my computer. As you can tell with all the RGB and stuff, I do enjoy video gaming as well, but from a video photo editing platform and a streaming platform, this does pretty much everything we need. But for situations like this, where I'm doing live streaming here, I have a Lightroom window open over here, I've got the streaming platform open, I'm doing all of this at the same time, a second graphics card can be a great benefit here. So the second card in here is actually, it's an NVIDIA GTX 1070 SC from EVGA. So for those that know anything, I'm mixing brands of cards in here. I have the AMD Radeon card and an NVIDIA GTX card in here. The GTX card is specifically just for doing encoding using the NVENC encoder that EVGA has, but then also allows me to do a lot of my video processing for things like Premiere, since this is a Windows platform, because the CUDA acceleration actually I find works a lot better. So you have a lot of flexibility here for pretty much anything you need. So this was one of the bigger upgrades that was done for our streaming. This means right now, while I'm streaming, recording, having the Chrome window open, and having Lightroom open, I'm only about 20% of my CPU usage, and my thermals are incredibly well controlled. So if you don't have the space to have a computer dedicated for streaming, quiet cooling, good airflow is going to be a major benefit for you, because as you can see, I'm this close to the computer here. If I have really loud fans running, it's going to cause a lot of audio issues, which I think some of you had heard a couple streams ago where I actually forgot that my second camera was recording audio sending over HDMI. That's why it sounded, you can hear the vents. So that's the computer hardware. That was the second major upgrade. The third major upgrade that we did here was actually upgrading to dual monitors. The initial setup that we did here for Lumix Live, I was using one 34-inch 4K display, which worked pretty well, gave us a lot of control, but you run into some challenges when you're working on a singular monitor. With a singular monitor, if you want to do things like have a guest come in and you want to use Google Meet, which is what we use for those streams, being able to take that window, put it into OBS, but then still have everything able to be controlled becomes a challenge, because your window starts to get really, really busy. So the next thing I upgraded was grabbing 2 monitors. Now these are MSI 1080p monitors, nothing crazy. They're curved monitors, because in desktop computing, curved monitors actually can make sense. But they're high refresh rate, they're relatively budget friendly, but the goal is having 2 monitors. That means I can have my YouTube stream here, my OBS stream to monitor all the different scenes that we've got set up, my Word document here so I make sure I'm covering all the things I need to, but then have the kind of secondary setup that we're doing for today's stream about the photography stuff of the Neowise Comet. You can have all of it open, ready to go, so that you're minimizing the amount of time that you're spending out, trying to get a window open, resize it, all that kind of stuff. So it really simplifies everything. Now, you can use really high-end monitors if you want. Those are great. Color accuracy, if you're in video and photography, color accuracy is a very important thing. So these monitors may not be the best for that platform. Even though I do edit on these, I do color correct them. You can get better monitors for color correcting and production purposes. Ideally, I always recommend at least have two. So we upgraded to have the two monitors here. So again, like we said, that's the ATEM, the computer was upgraded, and the two monitors. The next major thing that we upgraded were the lights. So originally, those that had seen the photos of the original Lumix Live, which I tried to find a picture of it, I think I purposely burned them out of my head because of the lights I was using. The original stream, I had one gigantic 3 foot by 3 foot or 4 foot by 4 foot LED light that would actually sit in the corner of my room, bounce off the ceiling, and then flood the room with light. And that, got the job done. So someone who's getting into this, if you already have a studio, you already have cameras, you already have lighting, you'll probably have stuff that will work for you, lighting that works for you. As long as it's color accurate-ish, you're going to be fine with it. But what we upgraded to were these two Elgato Key Lights. That's going to be one of those points where some out there may be a little contentious with it because it's Elgato. They are relatively expensive when you look at lighting across the board. But these kinds of lights have a number of benefits with it. They're soft, so I have nice LED even lighting. You get that kind of upgrade here, so you have the ability to do shallow depth of field, whether you're 4/3 or you're in the full frame like we are, and you can do nice separation with it. But the nice thing is that they're all Wi-Fi controlled. So I have an app on my phone that allows me to change the power, change the color temperature of them, and there's also the Windows platform for it and Mac platform. So you have the ability to go in and on the fly change the power and the color temperature of these lights. So, excuse me, for streaming, they make a great addition. And for those that love watching YouTube streamers and things like that, or Twitch streamers, it's a pretty common industry standard in that side of it. So if it works for YouTubers that have 25 million subscribers, it'll work for all of us. Yes, they're more expensive. Can you get away with using things like some of those aperture lights or just other LEDs out there? Of course you can. The goal is to always use what you have available because obviously for this, it's a solid, good-looking image. That's what the purpose is. But if you don't want to dump a ton of money into this because you're not sure if you're going to be really expanding in with this or finding a way to fit it into your business, start with what you have and just grow from there. That's exactly how we did this. As we started these Lumix live streams, it's all about knowing, are you guys going to respond to this? Do you like these kinds of streams? If you do, which it seems everybody does, we can just continue and upgrade and make it look better and better and better. Now, the other upgrade we made out of the lights and all that kind of stuff is the hardware. Originally, when we were streaming, I had my camera mounted up on a printer next to my desk, which, again, kind of got the job done. It did what I needed to. And then we took a tripod, put it behind the monitor, and made it so that I could move it. But those are kind of precarious placements of the camera, and you run into some inconsistencies because if you move the camera, is it going to be set up in the same position? So once I moved into this apartment, we upgraded the setup for the camera. So as you can see on the camera here, I have my S1H mounted up actually on my wall. so that it doesn't move, the framing doesn't change, you don't have to worry about any of this stuff, and I can run my power cables and HDMI in a very clean, organized manner so that I don't have to change or worry about anything like that. So this will work for any platform that you use. So the device we're using is the Platypod Pro Max. So I put it on the wall, literally screwed it into the wall that's there. It's been there since April, since I moved into this place. And I just have the S1H attached with a three-legged thing. I forget what the name of that L bracket is. Just ready to go, holding it up there. That means I can run my USB-C power, which is really just the included power supply solution for the S series, just without the sled for the battery. Plugged into there, right into a UPS backup down on the bottom, and then the HDMI cable runs. So it keeps things nice and clean, keeps the camera out of the way. And in this case, because I'm not using this camera a ton, because I jump between either using an S1R, S1, G9, I can just leave the camera there all the time. Now, when it comes to the camera choice, originally, like I said, we were doing these live streams and I was using an S1. And then I jumped to, I think I used a G9 for a little bit, and then I settled on using our S1H for this. There's a couple things you want to look at from the camera that you're using if you're doing it in a slightly higher end production scale. And a lot of those are just what features are built into the camera. As you notice, I have LED lighting behind me. And those that have been joining us since the beginning know about my comments on hue lights for LEDs. And I know some of you out there have also pointed out with certain LED brands that you get flicker, so you'll actually see the banding in the background with them. So the reason why we use the S1H, and I could use a GH5 for this, I could use a GH5S, really any of the higher end cameras, is because we have Synchro Scan built into them. Synchro Scan allows me to go in, pick my aperture, my ISO, everything that I need, but then fine tune the shutter angle. So I use shutter angle on this camera, which actually, yeah, so I have shutter angle turned on this. So I'm at 1080 60 frames per second, because that's what we're streaming at. And normally you would do 180 degree shutter angle for our normal process of thinking for filming. But at 180 degrees, these lights band, the LEDs behind me. So what I do is I put the camera into Synchro Scan, and then I just tune the degrees up, you know, 1 degree at a time or half a degree at a time until I see the banding go away. Since I'm not necessarily concerned about motion cadence as much, I can make sure that it is ready to, you know, match whatever lighting situation I have. So right now I'm at 216 degrees. Since I'm not filming heavy motion, I'm literally, well, I mean, I move a lot, but since I'm not filming, you know, filmic motion, I'm not trying to, you know, truly adhere to the 180 degree rule, it's okay that it's a more staccato look, because with streaming and compression and things like that, it ends up working. And at 60 frames per second, you're shooting around 125th of a second anyway, if you're thinking in the photography sense. So 216 degrees isn't really that tough, but it means I can keep my depth of field the way I want it. I can use the lighting that I want, and you just have to play around with it. So again, for those that are looking at it, you want to look for Synchro Scan. It will save you a lot, even if you're not doing this kind of filming. If you're out and actually filming on set somewhere or at a wedding, and you go into a situation and you're getting flicker in the lights and banding, go into Synchro Scan. It takes a little bit of time to go through and find what a shutter angle works for that scene, and it's not always going to be the same, but it will massively help you, so you're not having to go into your editing software and then try to find a way to mask out the bands. So little tip and trick there for those there. Now again, for those that have just joined us, I know I'm moving along pretty quick here. For those that have just joined us, leave comments or questions down in the chat. Tag @LumixCamera so that we can actually be able to get you guys some information. We can answer your questions and really kind of help and have this good back and forth communication with everyone here. Jack Salamanchuk is in the comments answering questions if you guys have them. So if I don't answer it live right here, Jack may be monitoring it and getting you guys an answer throughout. So make sure you're dropping them in there. So the last thing that that I really updated for our live streaming is the audio system that we're using. Originally, the first live streams that we were doing, I was using a Samsung USB little portable microphone, and the thing is great. It's a tiny little portable, foldable USB microphone that is awesome for when we're able to get back on the road, because with the A10 Mini, this is the other nice advantage of the A10 Mini or something like the Elgato, is that I can do these pretty much from anywhere. My MacBook and the A10, my MacBook or the Elgato just give me a ton of flexibility to be able to stream while I'm on the road. Hotels typically have decent enough upgrade or upload Wi-Fi speeds, so you have that flexibility. But what really comes important is to make sure your audio is good. Now, yes, we've had hit or miss audio over the time, and that's one of the things that just kind of comes from getting this stuff set up. For, I cannot pronounce that name, the Samsung Go mic. Yes, that's the one that I was using. Thank you for pointing that one out. Could not remember the name of it. So audio became the next kind of point. And when I looked at my setup, you'll see major YouTube streamers may have a couple different options. You could have the big boom arms and have some of the actual higher end microphones with pop filters, things like that. But those are an investment. You want to look at does it fit your studio size? Do you have the space for it? Is it really what you want to invest in? Or like I know a ton of you guys out there that are wedding, event, documentary filmmakers, even casual filmmakers, you may already have microphone solutions for you. The beauty with the ATEM and even with the Elgato HD60S Plus is that you can have audio in. The HD60S Plus does give me a 3.5 millimeter mini phone input for audio, and the A10 Mini gives you 2 channels of audio in as well in 3.5. So I looked through my closet to see what equipment I have, and I had a Sennheiser Avx system that I had used for a little while ago, plugging in with the XLR1 adapter that I use for creating any kind of training videos that we do here at the Lumix team. And with a simple XLR to mini phone cable, was able to adapt this for this stream as well, which means I'm getting much clearer audio than what the camera produces. And honestly, the way I look at the platform, being able to actually have control over everything from audio in the ATEM software, because it has the ATEM control software, really, again, steps that level up. You can have immediate control on leveling. So in the ATEM controller, I can go in here, raise and lower the volume. In the software side of it, I can actually go in and change the EQ, work on the gate, work on the compression or the compressor. You have all of that extra control that you typically don't have with a lot of the other kind of microphone solutions. So even if you have something like, I see in here comments about the Rodecaster Pro, NTG Video Mic, Rode Wireless Go, they're all great platforms. If you can plug them into the ATEM and use the ATEM as kind of the core for it, you have all that extra control over it. Now, the nice thing is the ATEM does let you send audio over HDMI, though I did find that we do run into some frame delays with audio there. So you can run into some sync issues with the audio running that way, or if I'm using that Samsung Go mic plugged into the computer, I would also run into some issues depending on the hardware that was running or the software that's running on the computer. If resources become limited, you can end up running into some snags there. So isolating your audio and video into a singular device really kind of smoothed out those issues that we were having in the earlier days of this. So that was the big update. Like we said, we've got the Sennheiser Avx wireless lav pack here, just plugged in with the little Avx adapter piece into the A10 Mini. Let's see here, the questions that we had here from McDrew. I think I pronounced that right. Can we do pass-through audio with a connected mic with the Lumix Tether app into OBS? Unfortunately, no, because it's going over USB and the protocol currently doesn't have audio support over it, like, again, to my knowledge, all of them right now. You do have to have external audio solutions. So those USB mics are a great choice for that. They're relatively inexpensive, and you can just get it set up. I think some companies do also make USB interfaces that you can plug, go from XLR to mini phone into this device into USB, which can work for you well, which also gives you some control. But you would have to check in on that for things like, I think HyperX makes one, which is a gaming computer, so video gaming computer company, and they should work. So the other question here was, the ATEM is only 1080p? Correct. This is only 1080p for streaming. And a tip about the ATEM Mini, whatever your video source is on the HDMI input 1 is what all of them become unified for. So if you're streaming in 1080p, that's what you've got. I think you can take in 4K displays and 4K mix, but the USB webcam portion of it is only in 1080p. So that's part of the reason why we only stream 1080p 60 frames per second. The second reason being that 60 frames looks a lot sharper for end users. So if I'm trying to demonstrate or show you guys a menu on camera, it's actually a lot easier to see. You typically don't see streaming being done at 24 frames per second, even though that's kind of our, you know, kind of heart and soul of cinematic video. Live streams don't really need to be cinematic, and they probably shouldn't be cinematic. They just usually look a little too mushy. The motion cadence doesn't really translate well for this kind of platform. And the cool thing is that if you have one of our Lumix cameras, the GH, G9, the S series, you've got up to 4K 60p, whether that's in the APS-C or Super 35 mode on the S1H, or you've got the full sensor width on the GH5 and GH5S. Let's see what other questions we've got here. For those asking about a potential future camera, I have no information on that and wouldn't be the person that would be providing that information anyway if there was any. What's the best to edit videos? That is a very hot debate. It depends on the platform you're on. There are other streams that can give you that kind of info. So that's kind of the major upgrades that we've done across the board for the Lumix live stream. Like I said, it's a whole lot of info. I really kind of tried to jump through and give you guys as much as I could to show what these streams are. But one of the things, and actually, yes, one of the comments from Filmmaker Biker Live, YouTube loves 4K and promotes it. YouTube does prefer 4K content from everything that I can see, so that is a very true comment. Getting into YouTube's algorithms, that's an entire different stream that I'm not well enough versed on. Marketing teams are better at that. But for this purpose, our goal is to connect with you guys. We want to have these conversations. We want to be able to provide tips and tricks that work for us. And be able to really get you guys comfortable with being able to use the tools that you have to be able to get out into streaming or just find new things that you may have not known that your camera does. So again, yeah, that was basically the overall coverage of what we do to stream and how we've improved it. As you can see, we've got that shallow depth of field. I've got lights that I can change the background color for whatever we want. So different types of streams, I'm going to start playing around with changing the colors here. And again, we're using Lumix S1H here in face detection mode with the 50mm S Pro, shooting at f2 at ISO 800 because of the lighting that we have, and it just works. It's kind of one of the nice things about this setup is that I can use all of this, have the camera there. I don't have to worry about focusing, don't have to worry about frame rate, anything like that. It just does what we need it to do. So, the last topic I want to cover on, so how's that for a segue? The last kind of topic I wanted to talk about is the Neowise Comet. So for those that are photographers or even videographers, I think you guys may find some good information here as well. The Neowise Comet is overhead currently, and we have the ability to, in certain places from what I've found, see it with our naked eyes, but with photography and videography, it's a great opportunity to catch something that's not going to be around for another 7,000-ish years or so. So, what I did last night preparing for this stream was basically try to do a ton of research into where I can go down here in Austin, Texas. If you're in a metropolitan area, like again, Austin, Texas, New York City, LA, wherever you are, you're gonna have to get out of the city to really be able to maximize the time that you're gonna spend out there. And as I said at the beginning of the stream, astrophotography is kind of one of those things that I really love in photography and even videography from a time-lapse perspective. So I figured this would be a good kind of ending point to give you guys some tips if you've never gone out and photographed or videoed or done time-lapse of astrophotography or the night sky. So what I'm going to do here is I have my Lightroom window open here. Now this basically I had to drive about an hour and a half, almost 2 hours outside of Austin, Texas towards Fredericksburg, Lano. So those that may be from this area, you may know where that is. If not, you can check it out on a map. It's about an hour and a half to an hour 45, almost 2 hours west of where I am here in Austin, just to be able to get a clear, dark sky that had minimal light pollution. Now, there still is light pollution because there are still a few major cities. For those looking to get into this, make sure to check out Dark Site Finder. If you go online, you can find those on, just go into Google and search it. They're maps that tell you where the level of light pollution around you. The darker sky you can get to, the better chance you have of capturing these images. So what I did was mapped out a trip, decided to get in the car last night, and just made a beeline out for the West Coast, or for the beeline out to the west. For those looking to photograph the comet, it's best to view it about an hour, I think they say about an hour to an hour and a half after sunset. So what that means is that if you have to drive 2 hours out, make sure you're planning to be there before or at sunset. This way you can actually frame up your shot, find good clear sight lines of the horizon. The comet is typically only going to be about 10 degrees above the horizon. So one of the tips I read about that is if you outstretch your arm, make a fist, and put your fist at the horizon, it would be about to the top of your fist as to where you want to look on the horizon. And that's general. It's also going to depend where you are latitude-wise. And you do have to be in the northern hemisphere to see this, unfortunately, from what I've read. So for those in the southern hemisphere, sorry. So yeah, once you know roughly where to look in the sky height-wise, you're going to want to be facing northwest. So it comes up a little bit north of where the sun sets, at least here in Austin, or in Texas, and make sure you have that clear sight line. So you want to try to get away from hills, mountains, unless you know where you're planning to make this shot from. And once you get out there, one of the things that I always suggest with a lot of people is, plan the trip, plan to be there for a while, because yes, the event's really only going to be maybe 15, 20 minutes worth of shooting where you can really be able to see where the comet is in your framing. But plan to be out there for a little while. Plan to actually go out and do either a long time lapse, maybe not a time lapse of the comet, it's doable, but even just time lapse of the stars moving around. Find ways to mix into that. And we have classes and streams on how to do time lapse because all of our Lumix cameras have time lapse built into them. It is a standard feature in every one of our cameras. But so once you get out there, start looking at the land, look at the scenery that you have, what kind of vegetation is in front of you, what kind of landscape can you make out of it? Do you want to have something in the foreground? Do you want to have something, where it's just a night skyscape? And really kind of look and see what you've got there. The best tool that I have found to really assist in this is an app called Photo Pills. The app gives you a couple of tools you can do. For this case, I can actually map out where the Milky Way is going to be, so I can kind of get two birds with one stone here for this outing. So I can look, I know where the Milky Way is going to be, I know what phase the moon is in. Right now the moon is in, I think, a waxing phase, so you're not going to be worrying about pollution or light pollution from the moon, making it hard to see. But you really have a thin window to be able to capture this. So again, make sure you get out there, find the location, look at the different areas around you to kind of see what works best for your situation. When you get to the location, start taking test shots. This is before the sun even was down, before the sun was even fully down. So I'm really just on the side of the road. You can see the main road right there, cars in the distance, doing some longer exposures, trying to get a feel for what the look's going to be. Since you have such a limited time to actually make the capture, you want to make sure that you're ready to go when the time is there. You don't want to be messing around with your settings, what you want to, how long of a shutter speed do you want. This is where Photo Pills comes in super handy for this. Photo Pills gives you a calculator for accurate star spots. So you'll know based on the field of view of the lens you're using, the aperture that you're using, and even the declination, so what degree you have your camera pointed up into the sky. Using that gives you a rough idea of how long of a shutter speed you need and what the maximum shutter speed you can use to actually freeze stars in the sky. And I'll show you why that's important. So a couple of these shots here, testing my shutter speeds, seeing what worked best. Around 6 seconds with the Sigma 24 1.4 L mount for this was about what I found worked the best. But what you'll see is when I faced northwest, I have the comet right there. So not really that big in the sky. This is where you also want to make sure you're looking at what lenses you want to choose. Do you go ultra wide, medium wide, telephoto? And each of those choices will have different impacts on your actual shooting experience. So this is shot again at that 24 millimeter wide angle. And for those that are looking at this, you may see that the YouTube compression going through OBS, this looks very washed out. The actual images don't look washed out. But what you'll see here is focusing everything here. It just doesn't really look that great because you're looking at a tiny little speck in the sky. You know that it's different than the rest of the stars, but a longer telephoto lens is really going to come in handy for something like this. So jumping over here, this is with the 70-200 2.8 S Pro. So this is our top of the line 70-200, all the way out at 200 millimeter. Now, the reason why I mentioned about shutter speed being a major factor here is if you look, because of the resolution of the camera and the field of view, motion is exaggerated. So if I zoom in here, you'll see I'm not getting pinpoint of stars, I'm getting blur. And when you look at that at a wider field, so if I look at that as a standard image, it looks out of focus. It looks blurry. It doesn't look that great. So as you start looking at it, the app starts to give you some other recommendations. So here, this is at 4000 ISO, 13 seconds, out at 200 millimeter, again, using the Lumix S 70-200 2.8. So if I go in here, and I'll make this a little bit easier to see. So if I go in here and I look at the star spots, again, you'll see they're a little blurry. They're a little, they're just not pinpoints. And again, it makes the sky look out of focus. The comet looks okay because you're much closer to it. You've got a better looking tail on it. and it's filling the frame better. But when you start looking at ISOs, different ISOs you want to shoot at, this is at 6400 ISO with an 8-second exposure. So I'm cutting that shutter speed down from 13 seconds to 8 seconds. The stars become much closer to actual pinpoints. They actually start to look, and hopefully the YouTube compression isn't really crushing this too much. The stars begin to look more like pinpoints. They actually look sharp in the sky. You can actually tell what it is. And the Comet, again, is still sharp. Now, there's a bunch of features built into the Lumix cameras that will help you with this. We have night mode in the cameras, which will actually turn the displays red, so your night vision is protected. We also have Live View Boost. Now, this is not to be confused with Constant Preview. Live View Boost just gains up the actual display on the camera so that you can actually frame in pitch black. I couldn't see my arm in front of me. That's how dark it was where I was sitting. But with Live View Boost, I was able to actually still frame and compose my shot, and most importantly, focus. With photography like this, I highly recommend throwing it in manual focus. The nice thing with the 70-200 or the 16-35, which I used as well, is that it has a manual focus clutch, so I can get it out near infinity and be able to actually check my focus and make sure those stars are pinpoints. So framing, making sure you're using that app to be able to tell where things are, where they're going to be in the sky, and your lens selection. Make sure you go with a couple of lenses. You may get out there and realize that you really want super telephoto. And you want to watch your aperture. For this camera, 8 seconds at 2.8 at 6400 ISO was still relatively underexposed. If I go in here and I actually reset this image to before any kind of editing was done on it, you'll see that it really was majorly underexposed. But you have some ability, because you shoot in RAW, to bring that image back up and do your editing there. Now, like I said, while I was out there, this is a great opportunity to also look and maximize the time spent. In a super dark environment, you're going to be able to see the Milky Way with your naked eye. So I was able to turn around, use that PhotoPills app, use the night AR mode, and actually see where the Milky Way was going to be. So that meant I could turn, look down the street, which this is heading back eastbound towards Austin. I was able to see that the southern side of the Milky, or actually I think this is the northern side of the Milky Way, was going to intersect pretty well with the street here. So I'm able to frame it. I know roughly where to look. I know, if I want to have that tree as, part of the foreground, you can plan it really well and be able to know what you need to set up. Now, the app gave me this information that at f4, I want to be at 13 seconds. It's really like 12 point something. So then I can go and back into what my ISO should be, which in this case was 12,800. But also, this is how you can plan out to get a lot of those shots that you see online where you have the Milky Way actually arching through the sky. So set the tripod up, panned through, and the tripod I'm using is the Peak Design travel tripod. So I'm able to have the camera set up in a singular position and take a few different images from different perspectives, seeing that Milky Way run through the sky, and then throw it into Photoshop and do my photo merge for a panoramic, as long as you're picking, in this case, I think it was relative to keep the horizon pretty level, and get those images where you've got the Milky Way moving through the sky, you've got some of that light pollution out in the distance there, and the road in front of me. So I hope those couple little tips were beneficial for you guys. I know that we covered and talked about a whole lot here. We had the LUMIX Beta Tether software update for the Mac OS. We have the actual webcam software coming in a couple of months here for both Windows and Mac OS. We have that firmware update coming for the accessory grip that came out with the G100 for select Lumix cameras. And then obviously the upgrades that we've done to our Lumix live stream. all of this stuff is done so that we can, better relate and better work with all of you in the community. We love being able to connect with you guys and really actually have this kind of conversation. So make sure that you guys are subscribing to the Lumix Cameras channel, this YouTube channel. Make sure you get the bell icon on so that you get notifications when we do these streams. We go live every week on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and sometimes we'll go live during the week for extra streams when we've got either topics like we did with photojournalism. So make sure you guys get subscribed, hit that bell. Make sure you go to lumixlounge.com if you're in the US and get on to the emails. That's so you can get all the updates on firmware, new product releases, all that kind of stuff. Make sure you get on those lists. And with that, I'm going to call it a stream today. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week. And again, make sure you guys subscribe. See you next week.